we have item 8, the proposed revocation of the reserve status of 2R Tirako Drive, Pakuranga.
Move this and Sharon second it, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks you both for that. Galina and Gary. Thank you. If you just want to introduce yourselves to the committee and go through I know it's pretty straightforward, but some councillors may not know all the details, and members of the Haukura as well.
Tēnā koutou, I'm Gary Jackson. I'm here with my colleagues Ben Parsons and Galina Monroe. We're here to continue the work to progress the proposed reserve revocation of land at 2R Tiraka Drive, Pakuranga, and seek approval from Auckland Council to request the Minister of Conservation approve the revocation of that land. As you'll see from that image, that land surrounds the Pakuranga Plaza shopping centre and is largely used for car parking. I'll take the report as read, if that's okay, and happy to receive any questions or comments.
Thank you so much. So yeah, just to be ensured, the decisions for sale have been already considered. This is the last part of this, so it should be quite straightforward, but I'm keen for questions if there are any. Perfect. I'll get you to step away.
Cool. We like that.
We didn't mean to make it so easy for you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know there's a lot of work that goes behind this. Right. Councillor Williamson or Stewart, would you like to... Councillor Williamson, you've moved it. Thank you for that. Would you like to say anything or just happy to let it go through? Any other speakers? Right. All those in favour? Aye. Any opposed? No. Thank you very much.
No, I want to see that happen on every other thing.
Yeah.
Long way you never say another one.
I'm doing it just for you, Councillor Williamson. Right. We have item 10, but we'll just see if the staff are actually here because we've rushed ahead. All right, sorry. I'm looking at the wrong item. Matthew and Greer. Now, we did have a workshop on this quite recently, you may remember, but the team is still going to go through a presentation on the item. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Greeley's tōku ingoa. I'm the manager of the infrastructure strategy team, and we're bringing this item on Auckland Council group list for the infrastructure priorities program. This is a process being run by Te Waihanga, the Infrastructure Commission, and as the chair has mentioned, we workshopped this a couple of weeks ago with you, and I can confirm there's no substantive changes, but we are just bringing a little bit of additional detail on AT and water care that we didn't have at that time, and the detail was also in the report. And today we're seeking your endorsement of the list, and we're seeking delegation for a letter of support and a review process. And a couple of notes, just that endorsement today and participation in this infrastructure priorities program, which I'll do a recap on what that is, doesn't reduce or limit Auckland Council's ability to make future decisions on these issues and projects. What endorsing this list does mean is Auckland Council can showcase infrastructure challenges faced by Tāmaki Makaurau into the National Infrastructure Plan. And what that will do, if it's in the National Infrastructure Plan, signals to central government and the public that these challenges that Auckland Council are facing in the infrastructure space are worthy of future central government consideration, because they will have been assessed through this process for value for money. So in terms of what we're speaking about today, I'll just briefly recap on what this infrastructure priorities program is, and Matthew will run through the list. And I just wanted to also acknowledge the team that have worked on this with us across the group. Some are in the room and online, but also a wide group of people across the group. So thank you guys all for your hard work on this with us. So Te Waihanga, the Infrastructure Commission, is running this process. They are government's independent advisors to government, on infrastructure. They have a national infrastructure strategy, and within that fits the Infrastructure Priorities Program in yellow that we're talking about today. Not to be confused with the Te Waihanga, and not to be confused with the Infrastructure New Zealand, which is a members organisation, and also the National Infrastructure Funding and Financing Company, NIFCO, who were formerly Crown Infrastructure Partners, so they just have a different role. And so the purpose of this process is to create that list I mentioned that goes into the National Infrastructure Plan. That plan is set to be released at the end of this year, December. So we're talking today about Auckland Council's input into that process, and just to note that others can also input, other entities and individuals can input into that list. So, as I mentioned, it's a process that reviews value for money for these different submissions that different entities can put in. It's voluntary, and what it's not, though, it's not a funding mechanism. There's unfortunately no money in it for us immediately. The idea is that it's a bipartisan list, and the National Infrastructure Plan being an ongoing plan that exists and gets updated over time. And what that program in yellow is doing that value for money independent review. So to qualify for that list, there are some criteria. Those things that we put up, which Matthew's going to talk through on the list, they need to be nationally significant. They need to be aligned with national strategic objectives or sector-based strategies. They need to, of course, demonstrate value for money, the whole point of the review, and they need to show that they can be delivered. They do need to be unfunded or uncommitted, and for local government, Infrastructure Commission has said that's from year 4 onwards of the LTP. So just for local government, that's the kind of guidance. And the last point is that there is a significant amount of documentation required to be able to actually fulfil the requirements of this process. So they are things that have got information usually already developed around them, although there are future opportunities to be involved. So the stages of submission, just very briefly, just important to see that the stage 1 is, there are stages and they're aligned to the Treasury's Better Business Cases process. Stage 1, high-level problem statement or unrealised opportunity. You haven't got into the solutioneering yet. You haven't got into, costs of the thing you want to build yet. Stage 2, you've done a long list of options and you've come to a short list of options, and that's where that cost-benefit analysis, value for money bit comes in. And stage 3 is quite progressed. You've got a preferred solution. It's demonstrated the best value for money, and it can be delivered. You might have noticed in the report, we've given an indication of the size of the infrastructure problem, and we've done that in 2 ways for stage 1 projects. One way is the cost to Aucklanders, so an economic cost of that problem. Congestion is a perfect one. The cost of sitting in traffic, a recent report has put that at 2.6 billion per year by 2026 for Auckland. The other way we've looked at the cost of the infrastructure problem is the cost of solution. So, and a good example of that, which Matt will get to, is supporting growth with new infrastructure. And we've been working away at a 10-year and 30-year now view of gathering together those costs. And the sheer scale of that cost is at a point where it's an affordability issue for Auckland. So the problem is actually just adding up all those costs and seeing that it's going to be a problem for us. And there are some AT projects that will be at stage 2 and stage 3 because they are more progressed, and Matt has got that list. So just very briefly again to put that into sort of this context for Auckland's infrastructure. Auckland contributes 38% of New Zealand's GDP, and it's obviously infrastructure that underpins a lot of that economic activity and social and cultural activity. We also already have a large commitment to infrastructure for Auckland through our long-term plan, and in our current long-term plan it's 74 billion over 10 years. That's out of a total of 86 billion. So we already have a large commitment. And so that context is just useful when we start going through the list of projects, which Matt is going to run through. And these are all heading towards an April submission date, April the 17th. So I'm going to hand over to Matt.
Cool. Thank you, Greer. Morena, Chair, Councillors. Ko Matthew Prasad, ko te kaingoa. So, going through the projects. So, in front of you, you'll see a table listing the 7 projects or packages of projects that are proposed for submission to the Infrastructure Priorities Programme. They were developed through a consultation process across the council group. In October last year, we had an internal call for projects resulting in 12 submissions for consideration. These projects were assessed by an internal screening group against the IPP criteria that Greer has gone through, and then with further direction and advice sought from the Auckland Council Executive Leadership Team and the CEO Forum. Following these internal reviews, the 12 submissions were refined into these 7 key problems or opportunities, and all of these are stage 1 submissions, so a high-level problem statement. There are stage 2 and 3 applications submissions that are being put forward, and I'll go through those in a moment. Each of these submissions are detailed within our report and in the appendix to our report, but however, I'll just provide a high-level overview of each of these submissions. So the very first submission there at the top is this highlight, which is the infrastructure to support growth in Auckland. This submission highlights the mismatch between projected population and commercial growth and infrastructure funding availability, and the challenges the current system presents to efficiency, cost management, and ensuring Auckland's infrastructure can keep pace with demand. So this is the very big sum of money that, to support growth across all of Auckland. We have $150 billion to deliver the solutions, both for council, developers, and the community at large. So it's the really big problem of supporting growth across all of Auckland. And how do we do that? How do we meet that funding shortfall? Through discussions we've had discussions with Kaingoa on this submission, and they have agreed to provide a letter of support to our submission, specifically supporting the problem statement, subject to seeing the rest of the content of our submission. They've expressed a desire to work with Auckland Council to advance parts of the submission to stage 2 and 3 in later rounds. Kaingoa are not submitting to this round of the Infrastructure Priorities Programme. They may do so in the future to later rounds. The second one there, submission 2, making Auckland's transport system more efficient. This submission seeks to optimise the existing transport network before costly new infrastructure is built, by making public transport more reliable and attractive, and by enabling multimodal travel where it is appropriate and value for money can be demonstrated. This submission closely aligns with the rapid transit expansion and time of use submissions, collectively targeting congestion in Auckland. The third one there is managing Auckland's growing travel demand through rapid transit expansion. This submission takes a citywide approach to expanding rapid transit network to help address the congestion issue within Auckland. It identifies and focuses on the development of 7 rapid transit corridors, but does not preclude others from being added in the future. I will speak to this particular submission in the next slide in a little bit more detail. Submission 4 is time of use charging to reduce congestion. So 2, 3, and 4 there are all congestion related, but attacking the problem in different ways. This submission presents the case for further exploration and implementation of time of use charging that works for Auckland as a key part of Auckland's transport strategy. And as Greer has mentioned, the recent report release quantifying the cost of congestion to Auckland at $2.6 billion per year. The fifth submission there, renewing Auckland's ageing ferry fleet. This submission highlights Auckland's ferry network as a vital component of the city's transport system, but draws attention to its increasing unreliability due to an ageing fleet and the effects of the current ownership and operating model limiting cost efficiency. The sixth submission there is, this covers the unfunded projects contained within tranches 2 and 3 of Making Space for Water program, which supports the integration of waterways and parks into the stormwater management system, reducing the risk of flooding while enhancing community environmental outcomes. So that's the blue-green networks for flood resistance, and it's specifically that component of tranches 2 and 3 of making space for water. The very last one there at the bottom, number 7. So that's the alternative stormwater management method for intensification. This submission is a little bit different from the others. This submission highlights the need for clear national level service standards, enabling Auckland Council and other councils to allocate funding more efficiently and ensure cost-effective flood resilience solutions. So for clarity, this submission is a non-built infrastructure solution. It's seeking changes to the system to enable the ability to deliver alternative and more efficient infrastructure. So it's not seeking a physical infrastructure item, it's not seeking new pipes and such. It's seeking a system change, and by making that system change, enabling Auckland Council and other councils, because it's seeking a national level kind of change, to enable councils to deliver infrastructure in different ways than the current BAU system, and hopefully reducing the cost to councils. So, which one am I pressing? That one there? There we go. So I'm just going to go back to this third submission here, which is managing Auckland's growing travel demand through rapid transit. So in that submission, we have a list of 7 corridors identified, and they're off to the left there. So they're the airport to Botany, Northwest Rapid Transit, City Centre to Mangere, the PT Corridor, Upper Harbour Rapid Transit, Stable Harbour 18, the second North Shore RTN, the Northern Busway enhancements, and Eastern Busway Botany Station. So those are a package of corridors put together as a stage 1 application. So from that, Auckland Council, together with Auckland Transport, is progressing a further 4 submissions as stage 2 optioneering and as stage 3 preferred solution. These focus on corridors that are identified in that 7, and they're the 4 listed off to the right. So airport to Botany as a stage 3 submission, so a preferred solution. Northwest Rapid Transit, stage 2, which is options. Northern Busway enhancements, again options. So it's progressed from a high level to investigating solutions. And then finally the Eastern Busway Botany Station, so that's a stage 3, so a preferred solution being progressed. Each of these are, like I mentioned, are referenced in the stage 1 rapid transit submission and will be submitted at the same time. So there's no submitting the first stage and then these other 4, they'll all be done at the same time. This approach has been recommended by the Infrastructure Commission through discussions with them. And it's just as a little quirk in the current pilot program that they've got at the moment. And that may change in subsequent later rounds, but for now that's their recommendation, is progressing this particular package of projects in this manner. So this slide here lists all the water care projects and packages of projects that they are preparing for submission to the Infrastructure Priorities Program. All of their projects are stage 1 submissions. And just to go over them briefly, the very first one there is the water servicing for growth and resilience. This submission seeks to address the challenges of growth and resilience through a comprehensive program focusing on enhancing water assets and exploring future water sources. This submission sits alongside Auckland Council's infrastructure to support growth submission, but it focuses in specifically to the water problem. The second one there, the wastewater network improvements for cleaner waterways and beaches. This submission seeks to address at a regional level Auckland's ageing wastewater network, reducing vulnerability to sea level rise and reducing frequent overflows during wet weather and fair. The third one there, wastewater treatment plant at Mangere and Rosedale. So this submission identifies the challenge around Mangere and Rosedale and seeks to improve resilience to flooding and sea level rise to that to that specific area. And then the last one there is the biosolids servicing beyond 2035. So this submission raises the challenge around providing reliable servicing for Auckland's biosolids beyond 2035 and ensuring a resilience to future demand and external considerations. As I mentioned, all of these are stage 1 submissions by Watercare, and they may take parts of these or entire. So, for example, the Maungi to Rosedale one, at a later round, they may progress that to a stage 2 or 3 application, as is for any submission that we're putting forward. So, on this slide here, as mentioned earlier, in October last year, we had an initial internal call for projects. Some of the projects put forward advised that they were not ready for the Infrastructure Priorities Program process, either because they lacked the information to satisfy the requirements, or they were undergoing an internal process that did not align with the IPP timeline that would satisfy those requirements, or some other similar issue. It is anticipated that the Infrastructure Priorities Program will be an annual or regular process, and that Auckland Council will have an opportunity to submit these or any other submissions that may come up in that time to future rounds. And just by way of note, round 3 has been provisionally confirmed by Infrastructure Commission, but a date has not been advised at this time. It may be sometime early in 2026, but again, no clarity on that yet. I'll hand back to Greg.
Thanks. And yeah, that's everything we had. And I think just a reminder of the timeline is that this is looking towards an April submission, and then and then that list would be publicly released in September, and then the National Infrastructure Plan being released in December this year. So I'll hand back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Just a small bit of work there for you both to be working on. No, I really appreciate the significant amount of work and making it so clear for us. I think at the beginning it was, how can we possibly get our heads around this? So clearly it's important to be part of this, and hopefully going forward it will be more straightforward for our residents and businesses to understand where the city is going with support of the government, of course. Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I endorse your comments there, and thank you for the presentation. My questions are probably just because I'm familiar with what's happening in the Rodney ward more than other wards, and around roads of national significance. And I just wanted to understand how they kind of fit into this. Obviously, we talked about rapid transport. And so the specific ones are, there's obviously these are a designation to run State Highway 1, the continuation of the motorway now, to extend it through, right through to Hana. That's all within the Auckland district, but it's obviously of national significance because it's State Highway 1, so it kind of meets one of those criteria. The other one is on the other side of Auckland, there's Kimu, and they also have a road of national significance unfunded to build a bypass around there. Obviously, State Highway 16 is the alternative to State Highway 1. The traffic needs to go down if that's closed. And at the moment, that's very congested. And that the alternative highway around the Kimu area is to alleviate that congestion. So just the thoughts of, I'd just like to understand so I can explain to other people perhaps why that doesn't meet the criteria or aren't on the list, or were they not potentially considered.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Yeah, I'll just briefly address that. We've put in a list of projects that, you know, sort of we're responsible for delivering, and so I expect Waka Kotahi will be doing the same for their projects that qualify. There is an opportunity, though, to put in letters of support for other projects that are happening. So we didn't mention it, but there's but it is in the report around the rail. Regional rail business case, which includes the rail crossing removals, and we're proposing to put in a letter of support to that. So there is an opportunity. Those letters of support, we're seeking delegation to Megan Tyler. So perhaps that's something we could pick up.
Just thank you for that. Thank you for that answer. Just through the chair, there may be other councillors around the table and independent Māori Statutory Board members that have their own kind of thoughts around what they'd like a letter of support around. So perhaps just could we get some guidance, the best way to perhaps get that to Megan, what's appropriate?
Yeah, definitely. It is also, we're just also making sure we balance between the level. There's obviously work in here that comes down to granular projects, but it's quite, yeah, it would just depend on the scale of the projects and how we get. But Megan's happy to chat to you after this on how we ensure that that's part of, it'll be delegated to Megan, so how we ensure that's part of the conversation as long as it aligns with our strategies and plans, which I think it does. Cool. Are there any other questions? Councillor Walker. Sorry. Oh, yeah, Councillor.
Sure. So, from my reading, these projects essentially are unfunded, and I'm assuming that means they're unfunded within the current 10-year long-term plan. Is that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So for local government, it's from year 4 onwards of the LTP that's considered unfunded.
And as far as funding is concerned, does it also mean that these projects or variations of them are also unfunded by development contributions?
I guess.
And bear in mind that development contributions cover off not just the long-term plan, but beyond that.
Yeah, I guess that's a point of clarity that the Infrastructure Commission have been working through, and they need to meet all those other criteria, but also to be sort of considered unfunding, and it was just a guideline for us, for local government, that it was year 4 onwards. So they, even if they're year 4 onwards or in the development contributions policy, they still might not qualify for this process. Yeah.
The other question I've got is an outstanding issue is obviously the structural issue that goes to our funding. That you know, we're not generating enough revenue from rates. Our development contributions aren't inadequate, and the consequences, we're digging an ever deeper debt hole for ourselves. So would we not include that as a project, because that's fundamental to solving things long term? Otherwise, we just put everything off.
Yeah, again, thank you. So within particularly that growth issue, that is one of the key parts of the problem definition, that it's not just the scale of the dollars as we add them up, but it's also the funding mechanism and the environment that we need to fund that infrastructure within. So that is included, and I think that's the beauty of these being stage 1 projects, is we can consider all of those system problems when we think about an infrastructure problem. It's not just the physical cost of the road or the facility. Yeah.
The other priority issue that I've raised previously as a transport issue is around smarter transport. You know, I mean, time of use charging is part of it, but if you look at other cities, particularly advanced cities, they've got intelligent transport control of intersections, so that you've got digital recognition of cars, queuing, buses, trucks, pedestrians, cyclists, and they're networked. Our intersections are essentially dumb. They're just based on a SCAT system. I would have thought that would have been one of the most fundamental things that we would be addressing in transport. I will be continuing to raise this, Mr. Chair. It disturbs me that we are not picking up on some of these things that I would suggest are fundamental.
Thank you, Councillor. It probably sits outside, I mean, that slightly sits outside this, but Andrew Allen and others have been clear that ATOC and the team are significantly increasing the work on exactly what you're saying. There's some technologies they're trialling and doing, but there is smaller scale work happening, but they are rolling that out. But maybe if Greer, if you wanted to.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Chair, for that. And just to add, it is also within that second program down around making the transport system more efficient, that optimisation of the network is included there, among other things. Thanks.
A couple of other questions, Mr. Chair. It would be helpful to know what substantiates alternative stormwater management method. On the face of it, I'm not quite sure what that is, particularly as it goes to brownfield areas, because we know that we can't detain ourselves out of the stormwater problem, I would suggest. So I'm curious as to what that means. And the other question I've got just goes to the earlier point that you raised about assets that are a little bit outside but have a huge impact on us. For example, the issue of a second crossing, which impacts significantly on our transport system. And obviously that's something we need to advocate for.
Thanks, Councillor. I'll answer the second crossing question, and then Matthew, if you don't mind answering what's in the stormwater management methods. That second crossing at the moment is just combined within the rapid transit expansion, and that stage 1 part of the submission is really about those corridors of movement around the city, those main and high frequency corridors. So that is in there as a North Shore connection. And maybe I'll just hand to Matt for the stormwater.
Yes, so the very last one, the alternative stormwater management methods. So that has come out of work in the Tamaki area where had quite expensive stormwater infrastructure required at a BAU kind of approach. And so from that work, it became very clear that alternative methods could be approached and used, but we have no way of measuring them or facilitating them. And so it's essentially advocating or requesting that at a national level we need to set some service level standards, which we then can set value for money assessments against.
Through you, Mr. Chair, have we had some reporting on that?
On the Tamaki?
Yes.
That's something that's come up through the development contributions discussions.
We've had a number
So I
of
think there was a workshop at least.
on it.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Definitely.
Through the
Councillor.
chair, yeah, it's coming through the submissions we heard around the development contribution policy, and there was a workshop, it was a couple of weeks ago maybe, where we took you through 2 or 3 matters coming out of those submissions, including this matter in Tamaki. So that's an example of what the team's looking at, and therefore an example of what we're proposing in terms of that theme for alternative methods.
Just to clarify, it's that example then applied across the region, or those parts of the region where it has merit.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Darby.
Thank you, folks. Just, you're asking us to approve a number there in stage 1. One is identified, just get my list here, at 150 billion. But of course, you know, we don't have the opportunity to drop down into a whole lot of detail on that, but it's a phenomenal number. The others are in billions, but much lesser numbers. So I'm just struggling to sort of find my position as a councillor and governor here, approving something at stage 1 that's 150 billion. That's going to scare the pants off every bureaucrat in Wellington, I'm sure. Can you just take us through that? Why are you asking us to approve something for 150 billion at stage 1? It's a primary gateway, but we don't really understand how that number's made up.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, happy to provide a bit of clarity on that. I guess as I was talking about, we've defined the scale of the problem differently for some of these different, some of the things on the list. Some of them, it's a problem because, for example, congestion is something we want to reduce the cost economically to Auckland. Other things, like the one with the very big price tag of at least 150 billion, from what we know at the moment, is actually the sheer cost as we start to add these things up, as we know more about it, is the problem. So it's not, through this, we're not asking you to approve that number. What we're doing is that the problem definition for infrastructure to service growth is that the cost is looking to be so high. So as we go through, if we were to step that program through to stage 2 and stage 3, at stage 2, you're required to do a long listing of options for how you would deal with that problem. So how will we either fund that very large number better, different funding mechanisms, and explore all of those options, but also fund options to reduce that number. So providing infrastructure in different ways, following different growth patterns that might have more efficient infrastructure costs. So at that next stage, that would be the organisation, and a lot of this work is being done to find those more efficient solutions. But to get to the point where we have a very rigorous list and cost and benefits have been analysed for a very wide range of things, and get to the point where you've got a shorter list of things that provide the best value. So, yeah, again, it's not asking you to say, yes, we agree that it's 150 billion. It's to agree that from what we know as an organisation, that number will be very high over 30 years, and that it's worthy of central government attention to help us solve that problem, and that it should be sitting within the National Infrastructure Plan as something that goes from being that problem with a very high number to through to stage 2. We've done some rigorous optioneering across a wide range of types of solutions, and through to stage 3, where you might find you've got 2 or 3 things that are the things that need to be pursued. They could be land use planning solutions rather than, trading that off against our infrastructure construction costs.
Okay, look, I understand it's a pretty coarse process, assessment at this stage. Just in terms of the stage 2, there are 7 rapid transit projects there. In our workshop, we did emphasise on homing in on rapid transit. 3 have been dropped off in the next stage, though, appear to be for stage 2, and that is City Centre Mangere, Upper Harbour RTN, and Second North Shore RTN. Can you just take us through how those 3 have been dropped off against the background of City Centre Mangere being formally identified as the most critical RTN project? Now, I know there's different views on how you deliver that project, what type of RTN, light rail, and the government has put a line through that. But my understanding is that problem and where that sits in the hierarchy has not gone away. There is no solution offered, it's just been eliminated. And at Auckland Transport, it's identified the problem is still live. So can you tell me how this seems to have evaporated as a priority in stage 2? Particularly that one, and then the other 2 as well.
Yeah, thanks again, Councillor. So as Matt was outlining, all of the submissions, there's a submission that gathers up all of those 7 corridors. So airport to Botany, all of those 7 are listed in that stage 1 submission. So they'll be there, they feature. The ones that are taken through to stage 2 and 3, those are the ones that, with working together with Auckland Transport, those are the ones that qualify to be ready with the type of information that's required for that optioneering stage and the solution stage, stage 3. So they will all be together as a package. So those other corridors that haven't quite got there to stage 2 and 3 will still feature as the original stage 1 package. So yeah, it was actually a good solution for us working with Te Waihanga to be able to package them all up together. This is the regional issue, but some of them are more progressed than others, so they will also feature in our list.
Okay. understood. And just last point, at the workshop, I asked, well, what are the projects outside of council, like Kiwi Rail, for example, and possibly Vector, that we could get in behind and support? My comment there, Chair, is I think we need to be very focused in that area of support, like the level crossing program, Kiwi Rail, is RTN, and freight, and, the economic outputs from that are considerable, plus the social commuter outputs. So that is, for me, that's unnatural. There might be some others, but Chair, I'm loath to go supporting too wide, and I hear Council Sayers in support of, Warkworth to Te Hana, but I'm cautious on that one, because I'm not seeing the benefit cost on that one being at the high level of the others. So my message there is stay focused on what matters to most of Auckland.
Chair, and I think also on the thing as discussed in the workshop, when the Mayor asked about the 150 billion, it's important to note that that's basically all the projects in the shopping list over 30 years. When we think of the RLTP, I think the bid was 61 billion for 10 years. So once you extrapolate that plus water plus, that's the cost to us, the development sector, community, everyone. But there will have to be prioritisation, because we know that we don't have that kind of cash just hanging around. Member Ashby, you definitely don't want to. Cool. Councillor Turner.
Thank you very much. Most of my questions have been asked and answered, but my problem hasn't been taken away. And I'm very pleased I'm after Councillor Darby, because he did it much more eloquently than I could. But I just sat there and looked at those figures and said, this has got to be cranked down to something more focused. I can't go out to the public and say I just said yes to 150 billion. Might be a shopping list, but where's how much is in the purse? You add it up in your head and there's a big gap, which you've just said is called unfunded. So can't we, can't you give me something a bit smaller than all those papers there on your desk to vote for? Because I'm not voting for that. It's tell me if I'm wrong, but the debate seems like you've got both whether we should have incandescent light bulbs or LED ones and nuclear power or not, all in the same discussion. You say yes to anything there and you leave yourself wide open for yes to stuff that I can't say yes to on behalf of the public.
Thanks. I'll try and answer, and let me know if I haven't helped. And sort of similar in my response to Councillor Darby, it's not that we're asking you to agree that it's 150 billion, although that is good information based on teams around council, Strategic Growth Alliance, looking at the infrastructure cost to support growth in Auckland. Over 30 years. It's on the list because that number is so high. So that is something that this process is very fit for. If you can't afford something, you should go through a rigorous optioneering process, look at value for money, long list, short list, and get to a solution that's deliverable. So that's why that very big number is on the list. The up against some of the smaller things that are on this list, I think actually brings up another good part of this process, which is that sometimes big problems have quite small solutions, and we can have technology changes, and we can have, like it's mentioned by Councillor Walker, we can have regulatory changes that actually unlock an option that is not open to us at the moment. So that's that stormwater servicing submission that we've got on the list. It's actually a regulatory change that would help us progress and cut costs to an infrastructure solution.
Okay, thank you. That is of help. The only thing I worry about is that these informational reports, you say yes to them and it's kind of like another notch in the noose, because later I'm told, but you accepted that discussion about 150. So thank you. I'll think about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, just in respect of the recommendation for using time of use charging to reduce congestion, I'm just checking that our submission covers off all the various provisos that should reflect previous council resolutions here. You know, it's very conditional on, and if we look at one of the earlier resolutions, mitigation of equity impacts, having public transport services and projects in place to allow road users to switch to alternative modes, the revenue collected, in addition to that, to operate the scheme be used to offset and as revenue costs allow replace the regional fuel tax. So there's a whole lot of provisos there, and I think our last workshop on the emerging legislation, had reference to things like the local authority having no ability to decide the outcome of a scheme once initiated, nor change or terminate, etc., etc. So I know other councillors raised concerns with that. I'm just very mindful that there's resolutions that support in principle essentially, and I don't think it's changed from that, conditional on all these other things, which which you can see emerging in our other recommendations here. But if they don't amount to anything substantive, and I would suggest on a far more granular basis than has been the case in the past, I'm sure that'll be the expectation of councillors, well then that other one, the whole congestion charging bit comes under a different lens. So I looked at number 16. I think you've covered it in broad terms. Is there anything else you think should perhaps be considered going in there to make that conditional support in principle that has been pretty well reinforced all the way along the last 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you for that, because that does allow us to provide a little bit more clarity on that one. So we're working with the same people who brought those resolutions, and into this process. So it will align. It also gives us an opportunity to put into this infrastructure priorities program the things that Auckland Council want out of time of use charging, and potentially highlight the constraints that some of the legislative drafting that we've seen might apply to us, so we can bring that through our submission. The other thing is just that we have said we're asking for delegation for a review process for all of these, where the detail will be presented, that those things would be picked up through that review. So we think that review is important, alignment, but also detail in previous things that councillors endorse, resolutions.
Yeah.
Through the chair, if I could just add as well, just to let you know that we are planning to bring the submission on the actual bill, which you referenced, Councillor Watson, to the next Transport, Resilience and Infrastructure Committee in April, a draft. There's still a bit of work to do. We can also have that conversation, make sure we are referencing some of that and those resolutions in that conversation as well, in that submission.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. Look, and apologies if I missed this, but Watercare Stage 1 progress looks very good, but I'm wondering if they're planning on providing any sort of further detail in terms of a Stage 2 or anything like that. And I think of projects like the Northern Interceptor is hugely important to support growth in suburban communities and their housing.
The short answer is Watercare will be progressing Stage 2 applications for perhaps the next round. The level of information required to satisfy a Stage 2 submission is not quite, they don't feel like they're quite there with it. Yeah, they're not ready for this round to do any of those Stage 2, and they'll be looking to do that for subsequent rounds.
No, thank you. Yeah, just noting that we have transit projects that are extremely important, and in large part because of the growth of the city. It'd be great to get that detail from Watercare, which is kind of the other half of that equation, I think. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Bartley.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for this report too. Can I just confirm, so being part of this program opens us up to where point 13 where it says how does planned investment compare to future needs and how do we address any shortfalls? So we'll be open up to like other advice or set of eyes on how we address our shortfalls with infrastructure?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Yeah. The independent advice is not so much on how we address the shortfalls, but how the problem has been defined and how an independent view on the value for money for the options that are put up. So yes, but in a roundabout way is probably the answer to that. They will look at our options, and if our options are around addressing the shortfall, they will then endorse the fact that that is a good value for money option. That is a good way to do it.
Sounds good. I also wanted to know, this is giving shovel-ready vibes. You know, when we had to put together that shovel-ready list really quick to stimulate the economy back in 2020. Are there any, is there any alignment between those projects and these? Because a lot of those ones were unfunded as well. And any learnings from that? And then also my other question is, a lot of these, do they have any genesis to our TERP and climate action plans so that those plans are still kept alive? You know, they're not sitting on a shelf and we can see their relevance in what this is proposing? Thanks.
That's a couple of great questions. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, very much shovel-ready vibes. However, it's not a process where we might get money at the end, unfortunately. So that's potentially the downside to it. I guess the other thing is there's not that urgency to it. We have more time and we are encouraged to investigate the problem very thoroughly in stage one so that we're not potentially, so that we've got a very wide set of options that we go forward with. They're well assessed for value for money. And that's why some of these projects are only at stage one, because there is a rigorous process that Te Waihanga, the Infrastructure Commission, require us to have gone through to say that we're stage 2 ready or ready for stage 3. So yeah, some differences, but definitely some vibes. And the climate question, thank you. The part of the criteria, which I think we had on the right-hand side, was around climate. And so, yeah, the projects need to be aligned with national strategic objectives. And on the right here is those current national strategic objectives. They're Te Waihanga, the Infrastructure Commission's objectives, and that includes enabling a net zero carbon emissions Aotearoa as the first one. So there's really good alignment there with our adopted positions on climate also. So they need to use these to moderate whether our projects should go through to their process or not. So I guess that maybe provides some reassurance on that.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Look, I think we're getting there. I was sort of a bit worried that we're going off track a bit. So I'm going to ask some questions just to sort of bring us back, because we did have a workshop on this. So we were asked for a list of unfunded infrastructure challenges, right? So that's why the number's big. We know it's unfunded. We're not committing. We're just saying this is high level, the big unfunded, right? Then it goes down, and this is for something for future governments, future local governments. We don't know who's going to be the government year 4. We don't know who's going to be around this table either. So this is high level, big stuff, off it goes. Then once it's assimilated, it comes back to us for further input and decision making. Am I correct in that?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So to my colleagues, and I don't need to speak later, I think this is identifying that we agree this is the size of the problem is huge, but we've at least identified the problem, and we'll have a chance for input a bit later. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I think the really important thing to know is that this is about getting an independent assessment process to evaluate all these proposals. This is not us setting up a budget. This is us trying to avoid what happened at Shovel Ready, just chucking what was in the shelf and then hoping it wouldn't triple to $3 billion a project. Thank you. Mayor Brown?
I was just pointing out that orange cone ready is what happens before you get shovel ready. My question is, where's the harbour crossing here? I know that the NZT are working on it, and they've told us that they've been told not to deal with the council, as if we're not going to notice something or other happening across the harbour. I think we should put it in there. If you're going to have 150 billion, you may as well toss something as another 10 billion on top and make it 160, so we can be realistic about it. And if we don't put it in there, we are tacitly accepting the fact that the government can do this without even telling us about it, which is not acceptable. And we do have some state highways in there, so it's not about the fact that we don't own the things, or there's some, the government will be involved in part of that, as all of those ones, there's no question about that. So I'd like to see it put in there, even if it's something we never do, which will be like quite a lot of those ones. Well,
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So that second North Shore RTN PT corridor, that's where it does feature, and we've put it in as a public transport network corridor and showing it as part of the regional picture that really needs to be completed for,
I don't even know if it's in that corridor. It might be somewhere else. I think it just warrants listing.
That is the work that we're asking for the Infrastructure Commission to do, exactly that, to assess the cost, the viability, the options, and that we're part of that conversation. So it is there.
Yes.
I'd like to have it highlighted.
Okay. Yeah.
The people who read these things read these and read what they want to see, not necessarily what. And I can't think of a bigger single expenditure coming up on one item than that. So if we don't think we're going to have one, don't put it in. But I think even if we're not going to have it there, we should say we're not going to have it there. But I'd like to see it discussed somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. Just any of these things that I'm going to be voting for, do they fall into this unfunded policy description that Mr. Stubbeck gave us when he left, about we've got all these unfunded policies which the staff have to take consideration of, even though we haven't got the money to implement them. So when I vote for this unfunded stuff, am I putting constraints on how staff have to manage their decision making, even though it's dreamland?
I might answer that through the chair. No, this has got nothing to do with any unfunded mandates or policies. This is about an opportunity to get some independent review, and we've been working with Te Waihanga on this, to define the challenges ahead of us in Auckland, and ultimately to look at a whole bunch of different solutions for those. So when you talk about voting for this, you're not voting for spending 150 billion over 30 years. No. All you're voting on is to put a program of works to Te Waihanga to work through, and to ultimately, if they keep going through the stages, to get even better solutions and different solutions, so that we don't have to spend 150 billion, let alone all the other money as well. So it's not about taking a policy position. It's not about staff coming up with crazy ideas. It's trying to define where we're going into the future, and hopefully getting there in the best way possible. So by agreeing with this, you're not accepting or limiting yourself to a number or a set of projects, because these are usually far out. Those kinds of decisions you've made through the RLTP or through the LTP around your commitments, and we're not touching those.
despite there being 7 actual identified things in the resolution.
Yeah, so we've definitely identified packages of works, and they're listed, and we've taken you through that. So all you're doing is you're saying, I agree with these packages, we want to put them into the process. But what you're not doing is saying, I agree to spend that amount of money even to do all of those works, because that's what the kind of process will take us through over time, okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
I have to say that it appears that this country has, when it comes to infrastructure in recent years, is really showing a competence deficit in terms of it building infrastructure on time and cost effectively. It is a major problem, and I hope you people are looking at that, because spending money on infrastructure is one thing, but making sure that it is cost effective and is delivered on time in a timely manner is also important. And that we have to recognise there is a problem here. When you talk about 38% of gross domestic product being contributed from Auckland, which is fine, but if you factor in the $6 billion of the CRL, which is a case study in non-effective, non-cost-effective, non-timely delivery of important infrastructure, it kind of gives you a different picture. I just want to make an observation in terms of, as a ferry
Councillor
user...
Lee, Councillor Lee, will the observation lead to a question? Otherwise, we can go into debate soon. So do you have questions for the team?
I just want to ask a question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. But before I do so, I will point out the motive for renewing our ageing ferry fleet is to build electric ferries for carbon emission purposes, climate change, etc., etc. Not because the fleet is ageing, because some of those vessels are relatively new. I'll just make that point. My question is, are you aware that in the original Auckland plan and in the Regional Land Transport Plan 2015-2025, a heavy rail extension from the main trunk line to Auckland International Airport was supported by this council, by AT, and also by the central government, until it was replaced by having light rail run to the airport, and after 10 years, not 1 centimetre of track was laid. So I'd ask you to consider going back to the very sensible, cost-effective, simple, low-carbon solution of a electric heavy rail connection to Auckland International Airport, like real cities' airports have all around the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
A couple of questions. One goes to water care, and in particular, all of the red areas that we have around Auckland right now. So, for example, on the Hibiscus Coast, it's not possible to connect because the wastewater system is at capacity. And this is, frankly, pretty tragic for a lot of people whose life savings and like may be associated with their section and the fact that, you know, they had aspirations to perhaps subdivide or the like. So is this list covering off that fairly immediate requirement?
Yes.
Thanks, Councillor. This is the water care list, and as we've said, they're at stage 1, and so they are not probably at the sort of immediate problem and solution stage that you're talking about. It's not localised down to those parts of Auckland, but it is putting that issue on the agenda as with the other issues, and highlighting that as a problem, and the opportunity is still there to progress these through to stage 2 and stage 3 submissions so that we're doing that in the most cost-effective way.
So I'm just bringing to your attention that I would suggest many hundreds of thousands of Aucklanders who are affected by this have an issue with this right now. It's not there. Watercare know it. Whether this information was withheld from us for some time, I don't know, but it came to light, I think, in November of last year. It's pretty tragic. So it should be up there. You probably aren't going to be able to answer that, but I'm just putting it on the table because it is an immediate problem.
Councillor Walker, yes.
so-
no, it wasn't had. I worked with Watercare in October, November, to when these constraints started coming towards me, to get them out to us. So it was presented to us, publicised as quickly as possible, those maps, and they came to us obviously for a workshop not long ago. It is included in the overall water servicing growth and resilience. What we're sending this to the infrastructure, the program list, I guess, is for evaluation and big projects and making sure that's value for money.
I've got that.
Separately, we are addressing the issue by working with Watercare to dramatically increase their spend. I mean, in the last 10 years, we've gone from $300 million a year to this year, 1.1 billion, but we're still far behind. But that is not the granular, there's the same issues in Papatoetoe, Beach Haven, they're aware of it, but that is not what we are sending to the Infrastructure Commission to ask them for, because we know that's an issue and we should be dealing with that issue, that's renewals. And
Just in response, Mr. Chair, it's not obvious to Aucklanders what water servicing for growth and resilience means. And this is wastewater that I'm talking about, not water. So again, I just say to you, I don't see it. I suggest that it is hugely urgent. So
the wastewater network improvements. So the issue with the growth, the issue with the servicing is because we're capping out in areas where there are overflows. So the second one around cleaner waterways and beaches, that is part of it. But the issue is we're not talking about individual renewals of individual pipes, and we're not sending to the Infrastructure Commission the overall problem definition is there, but we already know that's the problem. We are sending these projects to
through you, Mr. Chair. I don't think that you're conversant enough with wastewater to answer the question. I addressed the question to officers rather than
I was
yourself.
the one who asked Watercare to bring this out. Anyway, we're moving on from the question.
From my perspective and from the perspective of the community, that question lies on the table. I don't have an adequate answer.
And I'm not sure if you were at the workshop the other day, but that's what the purpose was.
Yes, it was. The other question I've got really just goes to this exercise where we're putting up a wish list. The wish list is dependent on funding. Either that funding has to be government funding or private sector funding from somewhere.
Is this a question?
Yes, it is a question. And it follows on from the question that Councillor Lee raised. This is my question, and I did hear Councillor Lee ask a question, and it goes to some reporting to us on the ability to attract finance, because as Councillor Lee has pointed out, our projects on a global scale would not attract finance, I would suggest, from scarcely anywhere. So if that is the case, and we're then dependent on government finance, and frankly, we need to have a good look at, and we should be receiving some information on governance, on government's finances. It may well be that we're in a very difficult position, and otherwise this just becomes a talk fest. I have a real concern around this process, and that it may send a message to Aucklanders that there's a solution when, in point of fact, there isn't.
Councillor Walker, if you read the agenda, the purpose of this is to find out what the future needs are, what infrastructure is required over the next 30 years, the current plans, what is funded, and then the gap. How does planned investment compare to future needs, and how do we address shortfalls? Private investment could be and should be considered as part of that. Maybe Megan would like to add, but this is the whole purpose of this process.
Through the chair, Te Wānga themselves have reported that funding of infrastructure is, the system's basically completely screwed in New Zealand. So we know that is a challenge for us as well as everybody else. So they know that this is also part of their plan around having a national infrastructure plan to show how unaffordable it may be. And then then continuing to work with councils and government about solutions, but also different solutions that don't cost as much money. So we've made that clear, and we will make it clear in our submission that funding's a matter of our problem. Minister Bishop, a couple of weeks ago, also announced some changes around the development levies, so that's kind of different to development contributions. So there's a whole work stream there which we'll continue to work with you on and make submissions and work with officials on to make that work as best it can for Auckland. That's also part of the solution as well. So it's a well-known issue. We're going to call that out in our submission to Wahanga know about it too, and we've got some work going on at Minister Bishop around development levies.
Thank you. Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Greer and Prasad, for the answers. So to my earlier question about those 3 RTN routes, and following up on the Mayor's suggestion that the Watamata connections be included. So it is being included. You confirmed that it is being included because the component that the council is supporting is the rapid transit connection, right? At this stage, we're not supporting like more roads because there is nowhere for those roads. There's nowhere for those roads to go. I know Councillor Hills and I know those North Shore connections of Northcote and Esmond, Akaranga, and the list goes on. You cannot have more private vehicles on those roads. There's just no way. So our focus is on the RTN, which is what we discussed at the workshop and signed up to, and that will be emphasised in the stage, particularly in the stage 2 as we get to the next assessment. Confirming?
Thanks, yes. This package is around corridors for rapid transit networks.
Yeah, all of them. Okay.
Yeah.
And at this stage, we're not prioritising which ones. We're saying it is a network, as per the rapid transit pathway, which has been recently confirmed, I imagine. So my second question is, we are going to lend support to KiwiRail's level crossing program. And I forgot to ask this at the workshop, where does the Wiri to Avondale KiwiRail project sit? Do you know if they're submitting that? And that was one that I thought that had merit for a letter of support as well. But that's just my course assessment of it, of course. But what's your view on that project if KiwiRail are lodging it?
Thank you, Councillor. So just to be clear, KiwiRail submitted to the first round of the Infrastructure Priorities Program in December, and the Avondale Southdown line was part of the rail business case submission that they put forward. Auckland Transport provided a letter of support for the entire submission, which included that and other corridors as well, including the level crossings. So there was about, I think, 7 items listed in their rail business case submission.
Okay, that's all underway, so we don't have to touch that. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Oh, that's okay. I've already asked my question about water care. Thanks.
I guess my last question is, we don't have to do this, right? We've been invited and we think it's a good thing to participate.
Correct, yeah. It's voluntary. But it's, yeah, and what it does is it puts Auckland Council and Tāmaki Makaurau infrastructure issues front and centre in that national infrastructure plan. If we weren't in there, I think we'd face questions about why we weren't in there.
Absolutely. Councillor Ferry.
And further to that, does this align with the regional deal work?
It does align with the regional deal work. They're slightly different and parallel processes, but yeah, there are a lot of problems and solutions sought in the regional deal work that are reflected in our submissions on each of these 7 topics. Yeah.
Cool. I don't have any more questions. I think we've exhausted those. You? No, thank you both. I know there's a huge amount of work and it's quite difficult to get everything in or have too much in or too much out, but it's really good. But if we'll just get you to step back so then we can debate the issue. I've moved and Councillor Darby's seconded. Did anyone want to speak to this? Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. No, just yeah. I think I think it's a very good step forward. I think we have to and should be doing this. I don't think those numbers should be surprising when we just approved a $40 billion capital program through our LTP, which is just 10 years. This is a 30-year program and will include far more than our LTP does. So we do need to have those answers to come back to us for future decision makers to ensure we are funding the right thing, supporting the right thing, because as the Mayor and others will say, it is cost far too much to do infrastructure in this city, and how we can continue to choose the right projects, fund the right projects, and hopefully reduce the costs to Aucklanders would be quite a good idea. So all those in favour?
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect, thank you. Right, we'll move on to, where's my, I think we're up to item 11 now. Right, kia ora.